Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to TCB Talks Redefining Leadership. I'm Allison Kaplan. I'm the editor-in-chief of Twin Cities Business. On behalf of everyone at the magazine, we are thrilled that you're joining us today for a really important conversation that promises to be extremely engaging. If the light's changing, it's because sun comes through my window at this time of the day, and that's how we roll in these COVID times. Well, leadership is always one of our most important topics in our ongoing TCB Talk series, and that's because no matter what industry you work in, we can all benefit from perspective and advice of experienced leaders, perhaps this year more than ever. We're so delighted to have three highly respected C-suite executives from major Minnesota employers here with us today to talk about leading through change, a global pandemic, an economic downturn, a racial reckoning in our community and country. What else could 2020 throw our way? Well, fires, hurricanes, a pivotal election. We've got a lot to discuss today. Want to welcome you all and tell those of you live with us today that you can use the Q&A and comment section on the lower portion of your screen. If you have questions or comments for our panelists, just go ahead and post them there and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. And now I'd like to welcome our panelists. There they are, yay. Okay, we did it. We're all live. That's half the battle. Well, welcome all of you. I'm going to just tell everybody a little bit about who you are and why you're here with us today. Let's start with Kelly. Kelly Baker is the Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer for Pentair, the global water solutions company based here in the Twin Cities. Prior to joining Pentair in 2017, Kelly served as Chief Human Resources Officer for Minnesota-based Patterson companies. In addition, for more than 20 years, she held various human resources roles during her tenure with General Mills, including VP of Human Resources for the U.S. segment. She's leading some new initiatives at Pentair, both internally and externally, and I'm really excited to discuss them today. Thanks for being here, Kelly. Paul Marvin joined his family's more than century-old business in 2006. He learned about the diverse composition of Marvin through roles in wood processing, materials, and sales before becoming president in 2016. He was named Chief Executive Officer of Marvin in 2017. Paul has been a member of the Board of Directors since 2011, also serving on the boards of Children's Hospital of Minnesota. And he's a member of the Windows and Doors Manufacturers Association, the Policy Advisory Board for Harvard University's Center for Joint Housing Studies, and the Advisory Board for the Surly Brewing Company. Born and raised in Warroad, Minnesota, he is a proud and active member of his beloved northern Minnesota hometown, where he currently resides, and I'm guessing he's really thrilled that he didn't have to commute to Minneapolis to join us today. Thanks for being here, Paul.
Thank you so much, Allison, for having us.
Last but certainly not least, Rodney Young, CEO and President of Delta Dental of Minnesota. He took on that role in 2012. He's served on the board of Delta Dental of Minnesota since 1998 and continues in that role as CEO. With $1.4 billion in annual revenue, the oral health insurer is one of the largest dental benefit companies in the nation. It serves more than 8,000 Minnesota and North Dakota-based employer groups and 4.1 million members nationwide. Rod is a leader who has embraced differences and created team-driven culture that operates on the internal mantra of "Together we can." Under his guidance, Delta Dental of Minnesota is addressing social inequity through the team member education, corporate collaboration, and taking actions within communities they serve. So glad to have all of you here today.
Thank you, Alvin. Thank you.
Well, let's start with the early days of COVID-19, if you can remember. Back to earlier this year, it feels like about a decade ago, doesn't it? What were some of the first steps that each of you took, programs, procedures that you implemented to make sure that work kept flowing and that your employees were safe? Rod, should we start with you?
Sure. We rapidly went remote, if you will. We deployed all of our organization by providing laptops for those that didn't have them. And then we also gave a stipend for office equipment, battening down the hatch, if you will, for the duration. So we were successful in going remote rapidly.
That's great. Kelly, what was it like at Pentair?
Yeah, those early days it seemed like years ago, but they were just a couple of months ago. As a manufacturer, we had several employee groups that we needed to deal with. And as a water technology company, our businesses continue to be deemed essential. And so in our manufacturing facilities, we still had employees working. And so while our office employees, we sent home very quickly, deployed all the technology they needed, we really spent most of our time focused on how to keep our employees in our plants safe. And in early days, we were 100% focused on that. And so we did everything from very detailed exposure control planning to education to ensuring that we had consistent sick leave for people, to COVID pay programs to give people a sense of comfort that if they were feeling ill or in any way exposed, that they would be paid for that time. But we really rallied around our pretty heroic manufacturing employees that have continued working throughout this time.
That's great. Paul, what about at Marvin?
Yeah, very similar to what Kelly just said. And it would be expected from Marvin. We've been a very human and employee-centric company for over a century. So our immediate thoughts were the health and well-being of our employees and their families, and it was all hands on deck for that. We actually had a pandemic plan on the shelf, believe it or not, that was created 10 years ago, and we were able to pull that off the shelf. It needed updating. Things had changed, but it got us a head start, and then we did those things. We 500 office employees out of the office in a matter of days, which we would have never thought possible until it happened. And then we did it. And then, we have 14 plants in 8 states across the United States, and the focus on keeping them safe and well was, came before how do we process orders or make money or any of those things. And in the early days, that's what it was, in communication. So I went live on communication early and often to say, here's what's happening, guys. And that was a key part of our very early pandemic plan.
Well, that actually leads me to my next question. So Paul, let's start with you. What does communication look like? I mean, I've heard all of you say you can't really over communicate right now. So how are you communicating? How much do you share? How often? And in what form do you communicate with your staff?
It was weekly early on for months, and it was from me, and that was different. So we had different modes, but I put a challenge out to the team that said, I think, I'm not big on this, but I think in a crisis that our 6,000 employees need to hear from the top consistently, honestly, transparently. And so we put out a design challenge of how can we get really quick communications, meaningful, transparent out. And we did it through video. And so I filmed a video usually once a week, sometimes twice, but generally once a week. And it was heartfelt. It was what people needed to know. It worked really well. And we hadn't done anything like that. I'd given speeches and pre-recorded messages, and other leaders have, but it was direct. It showed up on people's cell phones instantaneously. And that's what they expected in this moment of crisis, when people are wondering what's happening. And I think it served us really well. And I was really proud of our team to pivot to that really quickly. And the cadence got a little slower as we kind of got a rhythm. Not that things are normal yet, but we're more selective in using that medium. But other leaders are now doing that in the organization. I think that was one early learning.
That's great. So something that you might be able to use going forward.
We will use it going forward.
Okay. Kelly, what about at Pentair?
Yeah, I'd say very similarly. We found that employees wanted to hear from our CEO. right? They wanted to hear how he and the executive team was prioritizing employees. And so we really prioritized getting messages out from our CEO, email, video, by any way to reach all of our employees. So we put a huge priority on that. We also ensured that we loaded up our COVID hub. That's what we called it. We had a dedicated website for tons of education and very clear direction on how we were handling things to point people in that direction if they had any questions. You know, in the really early days, as you guys can recall, there was so much information to sift through, and it was really scary. It was scary for us. It was scary for employees. And so we pretty quickly picked up a few experts to help counsel us on how we could curate information for employees so that they could have kind of quick access at any time. And then we also lean into telling stories. And we have, you know, again, as an essential employer, we have just a number of stories that really make us proud on where we've stepped in. And so we created a hashtag Pentair Proud campaign that we will continue post-pandemic to really highlight what our folks are doing to help deliver on our customers in a really, really safe manner in this time.
Great. Rod, I know you've been doing a lot of communicating as well.
Yes, not unlike Paul and Kelly. For the first 90 days, we communicated on a daily basis. And it was an email that came from me personally to the entire organization. It included a lot of information around COVID, obviously. It included the governor's pronouncements, if you will. It included, we were fortunate to have a couple clinicians that are part of our group. We provided Clinicians Corner for information that our team members could go to. And more recently, we've been doing it 2 days a week. We've had communications 2 days a week. I'm fortunate, like Paul, I get a chance to join our team through video. I didn't know I could use the word Zoom so much in my life, but we join Zoom meetings with various departments on a monthly basis, and then we've had a corporate-wide Zoom presentation that we all can participate in. The thing that, much like Kelly's group, we have something called the culture wall. It's our intranet, and we asked our individuals in the company to share information with us on the culture wall so that everyone can see it.
And Rod, it's not all just about numbers and the bottom line. As I understand, you're sharing some personal details as well now and then.
Well, that's been the yes, that's been one of the upsides of this. As a CEO, I've never felt the need to talk from a heart perspective. I've been a person that's kind of been private in many ways, but we get a chance to share. I talk about everything when we first went remote to everyone to be safe and concerned. Again, like Paul and Kelly, the safety of our team members and their families was the #1 piece of it. To trying to talk about mental health and trying to talk about going for a bike ride or for a walk from that perspective. And as we've gone further to look at things around some of the disparities around, we share personal stories about that also. From a heartfelt letter that I wrote to the things that we're doing, getting outside advisors to help us in this process to communicate and to stay connected.
Right. Well, speaking of staying connected, what is remote work like for each of your companies? What are you learning, and how might it change the way you work going forward? Kelly, do you want to start with that one? I mean, obviously a good portion of the Pentair workforce is in manufacturing and has to be at the plant, right?
Yeah. So a lot do, but we have 2,000 or 3,000 employees across the world that are office employees that have worked from home. And I would tell you, we learned a lot from our employees in China, by the way, who were at the front end of this. They were very, very helpful. We've learned so much about things that we weren't sure were possible, that were necessities. We were a relatively flexible, we're a global organization, so do a ton of remote meetings and connection. But the extent of which we can leverage technology, use video to really connect and collaborate, I don't think we thought was as possible as it actually is. We have learned how to help employees manage work and life in ways that we would have never found ourselves in this position. And so the agility and the flexibility that we've seen, certainly in our people, and I think so many people have seen this, has been just quite remarkable. And we've seen it drive pretty strong performance. And so we are very committed to the long haul to continue to glean all of the learnings about how to stay agile, how to stay flexible, how to not think that you have to have in-person meetings or get on an airplane to conduct every piece of business, but to really leverage technology and working across boundaries in a much more effective way than we did before the pandemic.
Wow. Paul, what about it, Marvin?
Yeah, so a similar story, not quite as many working from home, but I'm going to say close to 1,000 working from home.
It has gone much better than I think. I think these crises force you in a short amount of time to see what you can do, and I've been delightfully surprised about how effective we can be in a remote or flexible work environment. We have taken, I'm really proud of the team. We do pulse surveys. We reach out to our work from home employees. How are you doing? We have multiple, we do almost a daily newsletter just to check in to inspire really on how to work from home differently. And they address all kinds of things from mental health to productivity. I don't see us ever going back to the same. I think most companies would say that. What I took, one of the things I learned from these surveys is trust us that we will get the work done. We've proven it, and they have. So I think it'll fundamentally change. I think there will still be not only a need, but a desire to be in person for certain things. The human interaction, something we crave. I think what we're testing right now is when do we most need that, and how do we design for that? And we're taking the state of mind of wouldn't it be beautiful if we could inspire to come back to the office when it's safe, but when they say this is a can't miss. Like I don't want to miss being in the office today because we're having this special meeting, and I thought that was a beautiful way to frame up the problem. But don't force people to do it. And I think it's going to be one of the great outcomes of this. Is it's going to force society and workplaces to say how do we think differently about work. So we're much the same as a lot of companies and excited to do it.
Before we move on to Rod, I want to hear about flexibility at Delta Dental, but one of our audience members, Paul, was wondering if you could give us an example of that pulse survey that you mentioned.
Yeah, so we have what we call an insights team here. It's a small agile team. We have a couple. Some are market facing and some are internally employee facing, and they have a process by which they just reach out and ask. And I don't think we should overcomplicate it. It's having interviews with employees, being careful not to have confirmation bias, but just listening and saying, tell me how you're feeling, and having a script. And so we do that regularly for different groups, and in this case, the work from home. Tell me what you're liking, tell me what you're struggling with, and tell me what you'd like to see going forward. And by the way, we've heard some other things. Not the majority, but we have a number of employees who have issues working from home, either technical issues or safety issues or well-being issues, where they need the discipline or safety of coming into an office. And so we've begun to make accommodations for that population as well. So we wouldn't have known that if we hadn't done that. So I don't think it's rocket science. It's mobilizing those competencies in your company that are good about surveys and asking questions, and not just getting answers, but interpreting them. And most companies have those. So we've just leveraged that on an internal basis.
Great. Rod, what does flexibility look like for Delta Dental? How flexible can you be? And what do you think it'll be like post-pandemic?
Unlike Paul and Kelly, our business is truly, or was truly, office-based. In fact, we just opened in Bemidji we just built a brand new state-of-the-art technology and call center where we had 200 individuals that are all rallied around serving our customers from that perspective. And one would have thought, at least I did, that you could never do customer service appropriately and accurately the way that we have. And within 4 days of making the commitment that we were going to work remotely, we were all successful in working remotely. And the deployment of that was pretty incredible. Hats off to our operations team for pulling that off. We find that flexibility includes people seem to be, the majority of our team members seem to be enjoying the flexibility of working remotely and are doing the Zoom calls and doing the things that we've all talked about. Yet, like Paul mentioned, there are a few individuals that miss being in the office badly. They want that connectivity, they want that space, or they can't necessarily work successfully from home, and we're taking that into consideration. And when we come back, flexibility will include, which is kind of interesting, because in addition to building our facility in Bemidji, we renovated our corporate headquarters and put $1 gazillion billion into this collaborative space. It's a team space. And my new office I made it such that we could have meetings in my office and things from that perspective. And in the past 5 months, there's only a handful of folks that go there in that process. So flexibility going forward will include individuals that want to work remotely, will adhere to that or adapt to that. And then, as Paul mentioned, we want to be able to get back in the office when needed from that. So we're going to have a combination, long way of answering that.
Right, right. All the things that were trendy in office design now,
Yes,
rethink.
we got it all, but it's standing there dormant right now.
Right, right.
Rod, just to make you feel better, we're halfway through our corporate headquarters remodel, so
Okay.
same thing.
Well, I'm curious from all of you, though. I mean, do you think that I feel like some people think work is forever changed, and there are people who are never going to want to come back to the office. Do you anticipate? I mean, when we look a few years down the road, do you think it's going to level out? Do you think there are more people who want to come back or want a combination, or is this just the future of work now? Kelly, what do you think?
Yeah, you know what, so similar to Paul, we've done a few surveys, and we did one recently, and I just got the data, and it's confirming what I think a lot of us are thinking is what we're hearing is that employees now want flexibility, right? And so they want to be able to come into work for really specific things, right? There are meetings that just would be much more effective if they are in person, strategy meetings, brainstorming, things like that. And they want a chance to collaborate and connect with coworkers. But they also want the flexibility to be able to work from home or to work from wherever it makes sense for them. And so what we're hearing from employees is not necessarily all one or the other. What we're hearing is, you know what, we actually want the flexibility to have our workspace fit for the purpose, right? And so we want to be able to have space to gather and come around for really important meetings that are important for us to connect. And we want to maintain those relationships and develop relationships. But, we also want the flexibility to work from home and be really productive as we need it. And so that's what we're hearing, and that's what we're trying to factor in as we think post-pandemic, what's the future of work at Pentair? We're really trying to factor that in. Overwhelmingly, that's what we're hearing from our folks.
Any additional thoughts, Rod, Paul, before we move on to some external relations?
Well, just maybe a thought provoker is that a reflection on my part is, and I think Kelly and Rod and other leaders and executives in companies, we're used to traveling and going to other locations and plants. And so I've taken it, I'm with my laptop in hotels and airports, and I've been super productive, if not sometimes more productive in those settings. So I've always known that, and nobody's ever wondered, is Paul being productive when he's traveling? But why doesn't it stand that others could be equally productive? Now we could say, because, in our company, there's a molder that actually cuts this wood and you can't do that. But I think we're stretching the limits, and we should be much more open to say, why can't I be open to do this from home on Friday to also maybe help take care of the kid? And trust me to get the job done. And by the way, I'm a believer in that over the course of time, if someone isn't getting the job done effectively, we're going to know. Like that, you can't hide that for too long. So I think we should lean into trusting that folks are going to get their work done from wherever they need to. And if they're not getting the work done, then that's a traditional performance management question that we're all used to have.
Sure. Rod, anything to add?
No, I would agree, Cab. I would agree with all of it. All I know is that this new norm is such that we recently hired a senior executive that I knew of but had never seen before, and we did it over Zoom and did the whole process. And so if you can hire individuals by Zooming and instead of being in person, you can almost do anything. One of the things we're about to do with that same call center that I referenced, we're going to add a few team members to it, and we're going to do that and are doing that virtually also, in addition to hiring and training them from that perspective. So I think it's our new norm. I really do.
Great. We have a lot of questions from our audience, and we'll get back to some of those as far as employee relations, but I definitely want to spend some time talking about external relations. Let's talk about this summer. And on top of working from home and a pandemic, then we had the killing of George Floyd right here in our own community and everything that has happened since then. Let's start with this. How did you as leaders, I feel like today there is, there's sort of this demand that businesses take a stand, that they speak up and speak out. I think employees are wanting that. That's tricky. How do you reconcile that? How did you as leaders decide what you wanted to say, if you wanted to say something, and how involved you needed to be? Rod, can you start?
Sure. Well, obviously, I and our entire organization were devastated by the killing of George Floyd in that process. And so the first thing we did is I met with my executive leadership team, and I listened to their reactions and their responses. And then, much like the communications that we're sending out, I shared my personal feelings about this. And then after that, I wrote what has been determined to be a heartfelt letter to the organization. And I wrote it in a voice that I've never used before. I've never referred to myself as a Black male, or I've never referred to myself as a person of color, because I haven't had to in that. And so it came from the heart. And as a result, I think it touched several members of our organization. I got back tons of responses from team members thanking me for the personal outreach from that perspective. And after that, we formed, and from the letter, I received enough comments that I was able to connect with individual team members and talk about their challenges around being disparaged or treated differently in their communities and so forth. And so that was heart touching for me to have a personal Zoom call to talk to someone about some of the things that they were facing. And then we recently formed our Social Change Council, and that's a combination of various individuals around the corporation, where we are going to be focusing on our own house first. We're looking inside first and making sure that when it comes to equity and it comes to inclusion and diversity, that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And we have some ways to go. I have to admit, we have some ways to go, but we're looking at policies and practices, and we're looking at things from that perspective on an internal basis. And then I did sign on to, like many did, I signed on to something called the CEO Action, which is a pledge that we will do the things that it takes to improve our society and to improve our business world. And as business leaders, we're committed and dedicated to do that. So there's a few things that we've done.
That's great. Kelly, what about at Pentair? I know you have a new Black employee network. Was that something you formed right away?
Yeah, that was something we are early on our journey on affinity groups. And I will tell you the events of this past summer and how our organization responded to it. Pentair has traditionally not been extremely outspoken on external kind of social issues. But this was one that I think shook all of us to our core, our CEO and our executive team in particular, and felt that we needed to lean in a much bigger way than maybe we had in the past on other issues. And so to Rod's point, did a ton of communication to our employees, provided forums for our employees to process how they were feeling, across the country and quite honestly across the world. So really invested a ton of time and energy into doing that. And as part of that, we spent time with a group of African American employees to really understand their experience at Pentair, their life experience, but really wanted to understand their experience at Pentair. And I would tell you from that, a few of those employees said, you know what, we think it's time that we have our group. And we were ready and willing and super excited to support the formation of our Black Employee Network, which we stood up in a matter of 2 weeks with two tremendous leaders that said, you know what, this is important to me, an executive team that says this is important to us too. And we've been helping them stand up programming and have been very vocal across our organization on the importance of that group, but other groups. We have a women's resource group as well. And I will tell you, it's been already a forum for us to come together as African American employees, has been a forum for us to connect with leaders on the experience at Pentair. It's been a forum for our employees to collectively think about how can we make an impact on our communities. And so really, really pleased with the early work, early days there, but that's been one of many actions that we've committed to take as a result, quite honestly, of this summer.
I'm curious, just as a follow-up, I mean, it's wonderful work to do anytime, especially right now. There have to be some people who are thinking, why did it take this kind of tragedy? And what do you say to that, personally and professionally?
Yeah, we absolutely have had a little bit of that. And I've even wondered that myself, right, as the head of HR at the company. And then what I quickly get to is, you know what, if this is an accelerator for us to step into this agenda and lead in this agenda of social change and righting many wrongs, then let's use this as a catalyst and an accelerator. And I personally don't think any organization needs to be bashful or ashamed of that fact. I think a matter of facing it, engaging, learning, digging in today, and trying to affect change for the future is what we're responsible for. So don't get me wrong, I think all of us had that moment, but I quickly pivoted from that to, you know what, we're here now and we're going to use this as an accelerator for our organization to make a difference.
Yeah, great perspective. Paul, what's happening at Marvin? Has there been much conversation?
I resonate with that last comment in that, I would almost be this blunt. So our diversity and inclusion, and we use the word belonging now. So we have this great history museum of our 108-year history at our headquarters. And I think someday we will look back and say it was the killing of George Floyd that began the journey for Marvin on diversity and inclusion. And I know we're not the only company in America. And I never even, I didn't care. I didn't care. I didn't apologize or spend a night of lost sleep saying, why didn't we do this sooner? I just said, well, here it is. Now, what are we going to do? We have this opportunity. How are we going to react in this moment? And it goes to the question of what is business's role in social issues. And all I can say is, so Marvin is, and this is context only. We are headquartered in northern Minnesota. You know what color the counties are in northern Minnesota. We have 14 plants. We are predominantly, our workforce is predominantly conservative. What's been tough for me is I've always seen it through the eyes of our values. And our employees embrace our values. And we have 5 very foundational company values and behaviors. And the first of which is do the right thing. And the second, which is be stronger together. And I always viewed this as, so now we have a choice to be neutral on it, quiet, which is, in my opinion, not a choice. That's a choice to not be for change. or we can do something about it and live our values. And I always viewed it through that lens. But I think one of the biggest learnings for me, and I continue to evolve, is you have to understand the ecosystem that you're in and meet people where they are. But it's a long fight, a long battle, and we're committed to it. I did a video saying as much, and I basically said, we will be a part of this solution. We will not stand on the sidelines. I don't know how. I don't know what we're going to do. I didn't apologize for not knowing, but I made the commitment that we will. And I think the central theme for us will be around inclusion and belonging, and finding a, this might be pie in the sky, but it's got to begin with a common decency of having these discussions and understanding of where everybody comes from, because everybody comes from a different situation, and it'll be a long journey for us. But I fundamentally believe that if businesses aren't part of the solution, they're part of the problem. And I put that stake in the ground, and it can be polarizing. It can be polarizing, but that's the spot that we sit in as leaders, isn't it?
Right. Thank you for being so candid, Paul. A question comes from our audience, Kelly, specific to your Black employee network. And of course, this would go for any company and a group like that. Lynn wants to know, how can non-Black employees be supportive? Should they be involved? I think there's been a lot of conversation about, is it okay to ask questions? Who do you lean on? Whose responsibility is it to make change? So what do you say, both on a human level and professional?
Yeah, you know what? I'll talk a little bit about it from a network perspective, then I'll give my perspective on that. So from a network perspective, I will tell you our stance is and continues to be that while we may have a women's employee network, a Black employees network, we welcome any and everybody that has an interest in that particular group to participate, to engage. We welcome it, we encourage it, we want people to come with us on this journey 100%. So there's no exclusion, right, in that. And I've been asked this question a lot, and I think very genuinely, people want to know, how do I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to do the wrong thing, but I care about my friend. I care about my coworker. I care about this topic. And it does start with talking. It does start with putting yourself out there and having the courage to just say, how are you doing? In the days after George Floyd's murder, I had many coworkers, many team members that reached out just to say, how are you doing? Kelly, I know you've got 2 Black sons. You're married to a Black man. How are you guys doing? It must be really hard. Just know I'm here for you. And starting the conversation, even with that, from just a human perspective of connecting in relationships, I think it is so important. What often happens, and it's out of a place of discomfort, I get that, is that some people just remain silent because they don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to do the wrong thing. And what I would tell anybody is that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. Remaining silent conveys apathy or lack of, that's what it feels like. And so do not feel, take it, there's a responsibility we all have to be educated. I'm on a journey now of even more education on the history of how we have ended up where we are right now. So everyone has their own personal responsibility to learn about why we are where we are and then how we can make it better. But in terms of connecting with people, remember that person that sits next to you, ever used to sit next to you, is the same person today as they were yesterday. And if they are an African American in this country, post George Floyd, there's a good chance that they are hurting and that they would love to hear from you. So that is my advice to people. That's what I would continue to tell anybody to ask that question.
Rod, I'm sure you've encountered this as well. What is your response, professionally and personally?
Yeah, so why now? It happened in our backyard. It is, and it played over and over. We are a proud state also. So I think from that pride, we don't want that stain to be on us, but it's going to be on us for a while, but I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to remove it. And if you think about why now, the murder of George Floyd, and again, he's one of hundreds that have happened. it was a global outrage. This took the world by a storm from that perspective. And what I tell people from a personal basis is, and then I'll come back to, I'll get to how people can help. And none of us were alive. Our grandparents, our grandparents weren't alive when all of these systems that were put in place that caused these disparities and caused this type of injustice. So we're not responsible for what happened in the past. We are responsible for what we do going forward. And we are responsible for changing it in that place. And I couldn't agree more. And by the way, Paul, I'm very proud of what I heard you say, very excited for your organization, that you're the leader from that perspective. Your approach to this is spot on, which is part of my optimism. And to Kelly's point, yes, talk about it, talk about it. What we've been doing internally is, the first thing we did is you've got to go educate yourselves. You have to go educate yourselves. And we gave Juneteenth as a holiday, but a challenge to everyone to go learn more about the disparities. We learn about Juneteenth and then talk about it. And then let's post it on our corporate internet and talk about it. So we've been encouraging education, conversation, to a point where, although middle of the year when this happened, we made it, we gave it as a corporate incentive. It's an objective for each individual to educate themselves and to share on a monthly basis going forward.
Wow. Anything in terms of education, anything that each of you recommend, required reading, listening? I know I read How to Be Anti-Racist, so impactful. Other sources that you would suggest?
Oh, you're asking me?
Sure, all of you. You go first. Sorry.
So the list is gigantic, and I'm just like Kelly. Although I'm an African-American, boy, there are things that I did not have a clue of. And so it can go from the 1619 Project. It can go to the recent book that came out, Cast, and there's a great understanding from that. It can go to, there's so many. And in fact, that's one of the things that we've done is we've curated a list that we share with our team and our organization. And we're also sharing it with our board of directors as a means for everyone to get on board and to buy into, not that they have to buy into, I shouldn't say that, to take action.
The only thing I would add to that is there is a million, the documentary 13th, gave a lot of insight into systemic racism. But what I would say is, depending on the organization, I'll only speak for my organization. There's a lot of different views out there, but the idea of what I would call, and others have called, first degree racism or discrimination, which is kind of easy to identify. The bad actors, like, that's so blatant, that's easy, and people say, and we all see those. The systemic ones are the bigger hill to climb. They're harder to educate, they're harder for some to believe in. And so resources that, enlighten on what systemic means, and that it's not just one bad actor that caused all of this. It's a system that brought us here, and it's almost to the point of who cares. I shouldn't say it like that, but we are here, so now what? And so I resonate with movies, with books that talk about the systems. It's culture, and as a business people, we understand that. So what got us there? And it can really enlighten for whatever that's worth.
Kelly, anything? I mean, there's so many, as Rod said, so many resources, but any in particular that you really recommend?
Yeah. For sure, Cast, just unbelievable to this point of understanding the systems and the construct that has brought us here, I think is tremendous. But there's so many great resources. Where I think that organizations can be really helpful on this particular point is spending some time helping curating, right? Or provide. We're in the midst of a 21-day challenge right now, which has been incredible. And our diversity team has put together this 21-day challenge and literally has every day something that you can do to educate yourself, right? Whether it's a video, whether it's an article, whether it's pointing to a book. and then are having weekly discussions. And while it feels a little bit like paint by numbers, what I've found participating and working with our employees on this is that people, they're so overwhelmed with where to go, what to read, what to do, that as much as we can help people get started on this journey, I think and I think we as organizations can help with that. And certainly I feel a responsibility to help with that and to set expectations a little bit higher than maybe they were a year ago.
So what about, recruitment? What about, so many companies are saying they're pledging to, increase diversity on their boards, in their ranks. How do you do that? Any specific steps that you're taking or can take or that you're discussing, Rod?
Well, I was going to give that one to Kelly since that's her sweet spot. But from our perspective, I'm excited to announce we just hired our vice president of human resources retired, and we just hired a new individual to take that spot, and she happens to be a woman and she happens to be a person of color. So we've started on that process, and she happens to be a human resource executive with diversity and inclusion in her background. So I feel like we've hit the trifecta, if you will, from that perspective. So that's our first start. And then we're going to be looking at our hiring policies and our retention policies. We're going to be doing those kind of things from a hiring and recruiting perspective.
Okay. Well, we'll save Kelly till last because we know she's got an answer. Paul, what about you?
Oh, yes, yes.
So again, recognize we're at the beginning of our journey and are working with experts, I'll use the C word, consultants behind the scenes, because we don't know what we don't know. One thing we do believe at this point is it's really important to start with a message of inclusion. And it's given our unique employee base and understanding, and to my point about meeting where we are and winning the war, not run up the hill only to be ambushed and then set your effort back, right? So we resonate with the notion of first understanding what does inclusion and belonging actually mean, and getting a basis for what that means. And maybe we're wrong on that, but some others have said that's a good place to start, and it's a safe spot depending on your organization. But that will build the foundation for how you have discussions on diversity, on equity. That's my hope. But again, we're at the very, very transparent at the very beginning, but we're committed to it. And I think that's where we'll start with what do we have in common and how can we each show up with our best selves? That's what inclusion and belonging means. And who wouldn't want that, right? And that once we've got a common understanding, perhaps then we can talk about and educate more on issues of diversity, inequality, equity. But without that, too many people go to a polarized tunnel vision view of politics without that. So that's where we're starting, for better or worse.
Kelly, anything to add as far as, hiring practices?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think hiring practices are extremely important. I'm happy to talk to that. But hiring practices in and of itself, that's not enough, right? And I've certainly been in situations where we have focused solely on hiring and recruiting and not enough on the culture and the environment and the development and the retention. Once you have people that bring a diverse background to the table, that all of that effort on the hiring and recruiting is for naught, right? It's wasted time, energy, and money, quite honestly. And so I do see this as, if you're going to make huge advancements internally, and certainly this is how we think about this, you have to focus on all three. You have to focus on your culture. You have to focus on, do you have that culture of inclusion, as Paul was just talking about, and do you have an environment where people can thrive, even if they have unique differences? Do you have a focus on actually opportunity and development and an ability for people to have great careers? And then are you going to the right places, and are you very focused and goal focused on your recruiting efforts, and goal focused, setting goals, trying to achieve those goals, fishing in the right place, having the patience to find people of difference that live up to the standards and the expectations that you're looking for. That's a whole effort in and of itself. But one without the other is really kind of a recipe for failure in my experience.
Yeah. Of course, one piece of retention and recruitment can be a community that we all want to be in and live in, and that is thriving. Our Twin Cities in particular, hurting right now. All you have to do is drive down Lake Street to see the continued devastation and effects. Do you each believe that business has an obligation or an opportunity, and what should it be? How do we sort that out? Rod, do you want to start?
So the answer is definitely yes. The business has an opportunity, and I'll answer that in an affirmative that I'm fortunate to belong or be a member of the Minnesota Business Partnership. And I've been asked by the partnership to chair an ad hoc committee to look at what the role of diversity, inclusion, and equity can be for businesses throughout the state of Minnesota. And I say this sincerely, I am very optimistic and very excited because you have the CEOs from all of the companies, all the major corporations in the state that have raised their hands and said, we want to be a part of this. We want to do something, and we have a role and responsibility. So the answer is definitively yes. And I think one of the things that we have to think about from a business perspective is diversity, inclusion, equity, all the things that we are talking about now, they have a dollar impact, a positive dollar impact in our businesses. And so we're not doing it because it's the right thing to do out of our heart. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do for our businesses as well. So there's a win-win there. It's right for society and it's right for our businesses. So long way of answering. So yes, I think businesses have a role and a responsibility in this.
Paul?
Unequivocal, yes. And I'll just, Marvin in particular, not only have we said it, but we've demonstrated it it's been modeled literally for 3 generations before this 4th generation that we're now in, that's now leading the company. My grandpa had this very, charming and simple way of saying, just take care of those people that matter, employees, customers, the community, the broader, do the right thing, and the profits will follow. And it might sound kind of corny, but we have lived by it. We have made our actions based on that. We serve a higher purpose. And I believe incredibly strongly in the notion that business can exist for good, and really good, and might be near the top of the list, frankly. The more fractured we become and in the current environment, sometimes, especially in this pandemic, and the civil unrest and the racial, I think increasingly citizens, employees are looking to businesses to lead. And we have not only the obligation, but I think we have a true opportunity to lead. And I think that's beautiful because we happen to be a private company. We can think long-term, and we can choose between profit and purpose and where we want to invest in that. And so this is an easy one for me. We have the obligation, we have the opportunity. We get excited about it. Our purpose is to imagine and create better ways of living. That's not a tagline. You won't see that in a commercial. It actually drives our strategy. Literally, how do we improve? How do we imagine and create better ways of living for employees, for customers, for communities? And when you're guided by that North Star, your actions follow. So I think we have an incredible responsibility and opportunity. And frankly, if I didn't, I don't think I would take this job, because it wouldn't be fun to me to just maximize profit. So it's the most rewarding part of the job for me.
Kelly, I know you said that Pentair certainly wanted to focus inward first, but there is so much, immediate critical community need. Where can and should business put their focus right now, yours in particular?
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. I think it's both and, right? And so I think the focus internally for us is really important to ensure that we are starting from a place of strength in terms of how we're running our business. And so we needed to do that. We continue to do that. Having said that, we are also very focused on living our mission and living our values. And I think for any company that has a set of values that includes respecting individuals, that includes doing the right thing, that includes doing what's right for this world, to believe that you don't have an obligation to help advance and right the social injustice is not living your values. And so for us, as we look at our value set, there was kind of no question that we needed to step in. And we're starting down that path, right? Whether it's charitable giving, we've refreshed, we've historically really focused on, and is still focused on, by the way, ensuring that people have clean, sustainable water across the world. We continue to do that. That kids are educated in the area of STEM. We continue to do that. But we're also now really working with our employees through volunteerism and through dollars on how do we directly impact at the local community level racial issues, racial justice, and racism. And so we've been leaning into that. I would say the events of this summer have sharpened that focus for us externally.
That's great. We have so many amazing questions, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Here's one that is something we haven't touched on yet. Raul wants to know if any of you have identified new business initiatives, new opportunities during this crazy, unusual year, and particularly in the area of digitization or just new things that you've done. Paul is raising his hand so politely. You go first, Paul.
We sure have, and it's a journey that we began on, I'll say, as the fourth generation took over, but in our looking out and insights, we became much more acutely aware of the time that we all spend indoors, and it has only increased, and the impact of health and well-being, be it physical, social, mental, is huge in the built environment, in the offices we live in, the homes we build in. And so we happen to be in that industry. And I think the way people will live in their home, what they want from a health standpoint, from a comfort standpoint, is going to change. So, you know, that sounds a bit of a plug for Marvin Windows and Doors, but we think that, you know, long before COVID, people want to live better in their homes, not just have it built solid and look good. We all want that, but what can it do to increase productivity, help us live better, more productively, healthier for our kids, for our family? And it's just on steroids now with COVID. And so we think we're extremely well positioned. We have products in development that are aimed right at helping solve for a post-COVID world where people spend a lot of time inside. How do I live healthy and both, you know, physically and mentally and socially?
Okay. We'll watch for more on that. Rod, what about Delta Dental? I mean, any new initiatives or new things you've identified?
So within the Delta Dental family, we've got a diversification strategy that we're looking at technology for the oral health, for oral health improvements, for oral health in general. And we've been looking at things like what role can we play to advance teledentistry? There's already a thing called teledentistry, but we're looking at if there's a role we might be able to play in teledentistry. We've been looking at, is there a role that we can play within the dental offices around the safety of the dentist, the safety of the hygienist in terms of PPE and things from that perspective, the safety of the patient. And then we've been looking at other digital technologies that take the need to be physically in the dental chair and see what that looks like. So there's a few things that we're exploring from that perspective.
Very cool. Kelly, anything to add?
You know, I would just say that similar to both Rod and Paul, we're finding in our businesses that are really focused on helping people enjoy their homes. They're just on fire. So our pool business, with many people at home and needing to, continue to find enjoyment at their home. Our pool business is absolutely going like gangbusters. And then in our water filtration business, as people continue to focus on health and wellness, clean water is really important. And so we're certainly seeing that play out in our filtration businesses.
Yeah, I could have really used a pool this summer, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, and I hope everyone takes a minute to read through the chat. People have posted some really great resources and books and podcasts and things that would be great for all of us. We had a question about Zoom fatigue. And as we wrap up yet another hour together on Zoom, how are you all dealing with that as we remain remote? How do you keep employees engaged and collaborate and kind of balance out the time online together and not? Kelly, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start because I'm looking for any tips. So anybody on the chat that has tips around this, this is something that we are embracing the flexibility and agility. I will tell you the ugly underside of that a bit has been the always on, has exacerbated a bit with many of our employees. And so we are leaning in right now, resources on how to manage your time, how to manage your well-being, how to draw boundaries, et cetera. But we are looking everywhere for benchmarks and help, quite honestly, to help employees balance that.
Great. Paul, Zoom fatigue?
Well,
balance?
Yeah, I'll cheat a little bit because I loved your last question about leadership lessons that will carry forward. I'll try to tie the two together, but one that I've learned, and it's a beautiful quote that was shared with me recently, but we all know how important our teams are, but this notion that we as leaders or CEO aren't responsible for the results or producing them, but our responsibility is to take care of those who produce the results. I wanted to share because it's been so important for me in the middle of a multiple crises to understand. Still may be driving the ship, but we have people to take care of on our team that will produce the results. To that point, to try to tie it loosely to Zoom fatigue, I think it's our job as leaders to really be listening. It goes back to that mental health, really be listening. What's working, what's not working, but actually genuinely listen and say, how could we do this better? Small example, we started our annual planning for the first time. We met in 2 pods, one in Warroad, one in Minneapolis. Our teams were masked up. We were in the same room. It's the first time we've done it since March, my senior leadership team, to do it. And it felt good. We were wearing our masks, but it felt good to be in person like that. And I think there are other ways we can do that safely and collaboratively.
That's great. Rod, we'll let you have the final word on Zoom fatigue and leading remotely.
And as I said, I think I mentioned, I didn't know I could use the word Zoom enough. So we've tried this. It hasn't been successful, but in our Zoom, we've tried to make it 10 minutes so you'd have a break between 10 minutes. And we've got to probably 7 minutes and had a 3-minute break between them. And then we've done something that's kind of fun. We are having a contest to see who could have the best Zoom background. And Allison, you've got a great one and from that perspective. And so I would highly recommend and encourage your team members to go out and find. Now it has to be within taste and not anything from that perspective. But Zoom backgrounds have been something that we've had as a distraction. We usually spend 5 minutes comparing Zoom backgrounds before we get started in a meeting, just to kind of break the monotony. So.
And here, I thought that was your swanky home office, Rod.
Well, this is the background that was given to me by one of our team members, so yes.
Wow. Well, it's good to keep it fun and light, and I think the human touch is so important right now. You've all hit on that in spades today. Really can't thank you enough for your time and sharing your perspectives and expertise. This has really been wonderful. I want to thank everybody who joined us today, and I especially want to thank our panelists, Kelly Baker, Paul Marvin, and Rod Young. Thanks everybody for joining us. If you know other people who might benefit from this discussion who weren't able to join today, we'll be posting it online at tcbmag.com. Hope you'll check out the website and all the great content we have there. Thank you all again for being here today. It's really been a pleasure to talk to the three of you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Allison. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great evening, everybody. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.